Good evening and happy Monday. I hope everybody had a holy and refreshing weekend celebrating Gaudete Sunday, where the priest puts on the pink vestments and tells everybody that the word Gaudete means rejoice. And we can rejoice because we're beginning another exciting Monday night open mic. Um, so I was just pondering over a video that I saw a few weeks ago, and I had very mixed feelings about it. It was basically, I guess this is a genre now. Somebody just talking into their phone, giving sage life advice, and they were frankly kind of sounded like they were trying to defend traditional morality around marriage, specifically that the marital union should be saved for the context of marriage there. But they did not do so in a traditional manner, even if they were attempting to uphold traditional marriage. They did so from a very strange point of view if we were to look at these things clearly. It was essentially an evolutionary psychology point of view that they have this idea that because of the way different brain chemicals function, that it's really good for human beings to settle down, to be faithful to each other, to establish a permanent life, and to have children together from an evolutionary psychology point of view. Now, I'm all about settling down to a permanent union that is faithful and intrinsically ordered towards the procreation and education of children. I'm a fan of that. Um, but it was just struck me that they were using these evolutionary psychology arguments to uphold traditional morality. Now, you may say to me, Father Sites, any port in a storm, things are bad enough out there that if somebody decides on account of these evolutionary psychology arguments to behave in a way that you see as upright and fitting, you should be happy about that. And sure, but I will also have my questions and my critiques about such arguments and such behavior as fodder for speaking about it. So, what is this evolutionary, psychology thing that we do? Right. And you've heard these sorts of stories before. You've heard these sorts of um, tales. It'll be something like, men have an urge for a variety of partners so that they can, sow their genetics as far and wide as possible. And women, because they are greatly burdened with both childbearing and child rearing, uh, they need to have somebody who's stable, who's going to be around, and who's going to be able to provide for their children there. And all of this, we can go back to, well, what is the origin of this? Where does that story come from? That's an origin story right there. You're in subconsciously reaching back into an origin story that you imagine that there's a evolutionary link between some human-like, ape-like thing, hundreds of thousands of years ago on the savannas on the African plain, and you imagine that you have some sort of origin there. And I'm not going to get into the topic of whether or not the body of Adam was formed by an evolutionary process. The church allows that among many different opinions because none of us were really there. None of us can prove that. So anything that's compatible with the creation story, Genesis chapters 1 through 3, is usually considered fair game for Catholics. But this continual uh, reversion in our minds and arguing from the origin point is exactly what a religion is and exactly how the how religions function. A religion functions by showing you the origins. And since, as we're all fans of Aristotle here, we know that the efficient cause contains in it already the final cause towards which it's going, how else could it be? Then what we know about our origin story tells us about our destination and where it is that we are going. Hence, Thomas Aquinas, quoting, I think it was Cicero, says that one of the proposed definitions of a religion is to read something aloud over and over again. Re legere. Cicero saw that as the source of the word religion for the Romans there. Something that we read over and over again. Why? Because there's something useful in knowing the origin stories. There's something useful to us about knowing where it is that we came from, because where it is that we came from tells us about where we're going. So it's another commonly used phrase that we like on this channel, that if you do not choose a religion, one will be provided for you without your knowledge or consent. And I think that's kind of one of the standard default religions that people have been provided with, is that they've been provided with this pseudo-scientific, intelligent sounding story about ancestors that we supposedly had hundreds of thousands of years ago running around on the African savannah. And as far as I'm concerned, that's not much of an origin story there, because it doesn't contain much of an appealing final cause for us. According to that story, if we just follow it through to its logical conclusion, we somehow overdeveloped our capacity for intelligence, and our overcapacity for our intelligence led us to projecting meaning out into the universe where there is none. And that has created a great deal of anxiety and worry about death. We can now conceive of our own death. And so this intelligence that we magically developed by hitherto, as to be yet explained, evolutionary forces have just created all the problems that we see around us. And so, that origin story contains the final cause, and that final cause contains nothing. That there's actually no destination, that we are not going anywhere useful, and you may as well enjoy yourself while you're here. That's what this evolutionary psychology religion leaves for you. A very bleak final cause of the universe, because the origins are out of senseless chaos. That's not what I believe. Obviously, the things that I read over and over again, especially in this Advent season, remind us that Christ came to earth, that he was born of the Blessed Virgin Mary in Bethlehem, that he went around proclaiming the good news to the poor and doing mighty deeds, that he suffered on the cross under Pontius Pilate, was crucified, died, and rose again on the third day, that he ascended into heaven, and he will return the same way that he came. And we look forward to the work that he's going to complete. That is the origin of the church. The origin of humanity itself is, of course, told to us in Genesis chapters 1 through 3, or 1 through 12, or 1 through 50, depending on what scale you're looking to use. And that tells us that we were created by God for a transcendent purpose. We were created in his image and likeness. I've chosen that religion, and now it seems strange to me that somebody would operate on a default religion which they haven't thought through. So, evolutionary psychology is much more science than religion, or it's much more religion than science at this point, and we should be very careful with what kind of stories we tell on the basis of that. And that's all I have to say about that for now, until one of you fine people comes and joins me here in the StreamYard. And Mark, of course, is, you know, a huge fan of evolutionary psychology. He's one of its greatest prophets in the modern world, and he surely has something interesting to say about that.
I don't know if I hate the evolutionary part or the psychology part more, but yeah, definitely bad. Why is my camera all messed up?
My camera was really funny when I first turned it on, and like the saturation was blown way out of proportion, and then it just kind of calibrated itself. So try leaving it on for a little while, but these are digital implements. They're not supposed to like have time to get warmed up.
Yeah, but they do. It's really strange. I mean, all the computer people, we all talk about gremlins. Just saying, we all use the term gremlins, so just make of that what you will. You know, it struck me, Father, was you were, you know, when you that last bit where you said, "Here's what I believe," right? And it's miracle, 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 miracle. It's like, aha, yes. And one of the flaws is just weird coincidence. I've been looking into this whole breakdown of the Fuentes and Piers Morgan catastrophe, where Piers Morgan knows he lost. Nobody understands why, and they're all doing commentary, and they're all completely wrong. I'm like, you're all logical, and you're all wrong. And I was watching, I haven't finished it, and it's not even that long. I just got sidetracked. Warren Smith, who has a channel, and the Secret Scholar Society. Oh, isn't he clever? 3 S's. And he just got done describing this. Well, yeah, you know, Piers' logic. And I'm like, the clip you played of Piers is just Piers with ad hominem attacks. And ad hominem attacks have no logic. They're not logical arguments. Mm-hmm. In fact, usually the logisticians use this all the time. You're not speaking logic, you're speaking, right? And this guy, who he's not terrible or anything, right? Most of the stuff he says to bang on, but again, he's way out in space. Like he can't play in that arena at all. None of them can. Like even Andrew, I love Andrew Wilson. He's missing it too. Sargon of Akkad, you know, Carl Benjamin, totally missing it. And that's because they all have random religions that are coming to the same conclusion, right? Mm-hmm. But they're trying to build it from the ground up. They're trying to recreate the things they see that they need, like marriage, from science, using logic, reason, and rationality. I'm just going to tell you, hint, I'm going to skip to the end. That ain't going to work because the result is the same as the Protestant splitting result, because that's the pattern, right? Where this person believes it for this reason, and this person believes it for this reason, but there's still an ideological fight because your sources are different. And so your conclusions on other things are going to be different. So now you can agree to marriage.
There's not a participation in the same thing that's getting them to that conclusion.
Exactly.
And so the results don't necessarily tell you about how things are operating underneath the surface. Exactly.
And the worst part is they cannot agree on an implementation because they don't agree on the final cause. They may agree on the proximal cause, but the final cause of marriage is not to get married and have kids. That's not the final cause. So,
the final cause is to give glory to God. Is that what we're looking for? Okay, yeah, okay, sure, yeah, okay, bye.
You're asking me? That's your expert. You're the expert on that, not me.
I just didn't quite know what you were pointing at. So
no, I'm pointing at the fact that even if you can get agreement, this is the problem of today: is agreement on one issue. And so what people do is they oh, Tim Pool said this, and so I'm going to follow him, right? Until there's a disagreement with him on some important issue. And then, well, I'm going to jump over to Carl Benjamin, or I'm going to listen to Warren Smith, or I'm going to listen to Andrew Wilson, or and I like all those guys, but also this is not stable. You're just jumping from person to person.
Mm-hmm.
And because you're persuaded, or enchanted by a logical argument, by a logical set of connections, but they're not tied together. And even if they seem to agree on something like marriage, or even something like community, or whatever that's supposed to mean, book coming soon, Wednesday. They tell me Wednesday. They still don't agree on enough, and so there's still plenty of room for disagreement, and that's what they fall into. And it's this constant cycle of temporary agreement falling into disagreement and starting like all over again on that whole trend, over and over and over. And
until Jesus comes again.
Well, let's not hurry that along. That doesn't. I don't know. I'm
ready, stories. Man. I look out there and I'm like, I'm not sure this is getting any better. Like, you can wrap this up anytime.
Yeah, I think the other thing is too, it's weird to me that many of these same people, not all of them or anything, but many of them will talk about narrative and narrative control. And I'm like, well, that's hysterical, because you seem to think it's important and you don't have one, and you're not playing that game, but you seem to think that that's what's going on and that's important. So I can only assume that you don't like narrative.
That would probably just be a matter of they don't want to submit to an authority outside of them.
Right.
And having been submitted to an authority outside of me my entire life long, I can confirm that sometimes it's annoying. But sometimes it's pretty inconvenient. So it's not like it's an irrational fear.
Right.
But I think it's better than the alternative. So I'll just try and exercise my influence from the inside, and hopefully when I'm wrong, God will stop me, and when I'm right, God will bless me.
Yeah. Well, I think that fact of it's effectively, it's a verbal war of religion. That's really what we're going through. We're going through this verbal war of religion, where it's religion. It's religion of the day sort of stuff. I got to finish reading that book. It's religion of the day, battling religion of the day over and over again. Mm-hmm. And I mean, religion of the day, it's really good, because it's like, these people are switching up their positions by the day. Mm-hmm. And they're falling, and then they're falling in and out of different various cults, effectively, for lack of a better term. And those cults are being powered by the internet and by YouTube and Rumble and Patreon and all these other sites where you're holding your cult up through money. That's effectively what's happening. And I'm always shocked that people don't see this. I thought for sure that the Piers Fuente talk would just show people, no. People have different fields of perception. No one's talking about perception. I'm like, are you guys okay? I also learned that Baudrillard is just restating nominalism only slightly differently.
I don't know who that is, but I don't like nominalism, so boo.
He wrote Simulation and Simulacra.
Oh, okay.
That's the book in the Matrix. It's it's like 1981. It's relatively late. Also, he's French. That should have been a hint, but I guess nobody wants to own up to the hint. Like, guys, the French and German so-called philosophers are all horrible. Like, this isn't that hard. You can't come up with a counterexample. So
yeah, they'd all end up being theologians. So
well, some of them end up being terrible theologians. But basically, whenever they do anything at this scale, it's a disaster. Probably not.
You probably haven't read any Garrigou-Lagrange, but he was a 20th century French theologian who was excellent. So
there might be one good French theologian somewhere. That's probably true. There's the exception that proves the rule, Father. So I definitely haven't read whatever wacky name that was, because I'm at the burn the book stage, like, for sure.
No, we need to hold on to the 3 ages of the interior life. That's that one I will personally pull the copy on Leibowitz style. So
Okay.
we'll,
Yeah, but like you see this in the world, and
yeah, and it's just,
terrible.
like what flavor of cult are we talking about? Are we talking about a cult of political activity? You wouldn't believe how many times I just give the people advice to stop watching the news so much.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
like
yeah, yeah.
it's like I hear problem after problem coming up, but it's like maybe you just need to watch the news less, and you won't struggle with anger so much.
Yeah,
Like,
right. Well, and that's the goal. And I think that's the other problem is they really think by being, we'll say, on board with the inevitable and obvious, and 3-year-old could have figured it out. What took you so long? Conclusions like, oh, we need marriage to have a reasonable, stable civilization. They think that they're in enough alignment or something with the Cathodox, because the Anglicans blew up, so they're gone. The Cathodox, and so that's enough or something. And I'm like, no, you're actually doing like Satan's work by creating these pseudo-religious cults that, and then going, aha, we kind of agree. And it's like, Christianity is the solution. And it's like, did you mean Christendom? Because that would be the right answer. And everything else would actually be the wrong answer. But hey, this should be obvious, but apparently none of these people have actually read a history book just once ever and figured it out from the obviousness of the whole situation. Or they're only reading history, we'll say, after Henry VIII and not
well,
understanding.
look, I just look at the origin story they're telling themselves. It's like we're just a bunch of anxious, overintelligent monkeys,
Oh, the
Like,
origin story, and of course on Mark of Wisdom Navigating Patterns channel, I have a video on this. I think it's a live stream. The origin story is the battle of the two books. It's really all that's going on, right? So you take your book, which is what's it called? It's just one word, no author. It's hard to
La
remember.
Biblia.
Oh, yes. So you take that book, and their book is just the origin of species, and they somehow in their mind translate species to life. And that's it. Like, just that one, like, thinking about the world that way, that just changes everything. Like, that just explains a bunch of stuff. Now, in order for that to happen, and because Darwin never made any of these mistakes, the interesting thing is all the people using Darwin's work are making obvious mistakes that Darwin would never have made. And
He was a really boring scientist writing about exactly one thing.
well, and also he was relatively like, God-centric in his, well, this all came from God stuff in the book. So why they skip over those parts, I don't know. But also that's in the book, right? So yeah, I mean, it's alchemy for biology is effectively what speciation is, right? It's the same process of categorization, which categorization or ontology, little o ontology, because the scientists always try to steal. Like, oh no, ontology means being. It's never meant being. You're delusional. You want it to mean being because you think the origin of species is the origin of life. See how well this works? You can understand everything they're saying by changing one word and pitting those two books against one another. And then they're going from that framework, and they're developing everything from that framework. But it's just all creation denial, and it's all middle out thinking. I mean, imagine being Warren Smith and playing a clip of somebody just doing ad hominem attacks, not making anything like a logical argument at all, because an argument against a person there's no logic can be involved in that, right? And then saying, well, Piers is logic, and I'm like, he didn't use any. Like, where are you getting this from? What? Why is this so hard? You guys love to blame ad hominem attacks.
I mean, so we're gonna.
But that's his viewpoint. His viewpoint is all discussions are logical. The way you win arguments and talk to people and win is logic. Therefore, Piers must be doing logic. Piers Morgan is on TV. His stock and trade is reputation destruction because the value for him is reputation. See how easy this is when you don't make it complicated by going from your own internal perspective. Well, all my arguments and all the arguments I care about and all the ways in which you win or lose arguments are logic. Therefore, Piers, who is talking, must be making a logical argument. That's what's happening with this poor guy. I'm like, this guy's just an idiot. Fair enough, but like, what's going on?
Yeah, so reputation destruction really doesn't matter. The logic really doesn't matter. It's a matter of
There's no logic.
Provoking a disgust response in somebody towards somebody else. Yeah, in the audience. Yeah, right. And that's
it's a form of enchantment.
You could do that with logic. Like sometimes that might work, but it's not necessarily going to be logical.
Not with the same audience.
Sure.
This is again the matter of perspective. See, perspective is really important, right? So this is the whole thing. And actually, I finally got this video done. I'm so excited. I had to use slides, but they're animated slides. It's going to be great. The problem is when you're looking at audience, the reason why the Sam Harris, Jordan Peterson 4-part debate series changed no one's mind, no one. It switched almost no one over in either direction, is because of audience. The Sam Harris audience is already presuming certain things, and they're never going to not presume those things. And so a logical argument that leads a certain direction is never going to work with that. So
because they're not accepting, because you either you're accepting their premises and you're not going to be able to argue a sensible conclusion from that, or you're arguing from premises that they don't share, and therefore they're not going to find it convincing no matter how logical it is.
Right. And they have to not be tied up in certain presumptions. So the reason why, your opening monologue there was so good is because you can see that pattern right there. The pattern is, if you presume something like, I can look at the world from my perspective and come up with a justification for marriage, which I obviously see people need, you're going to get an infinite number of cults, because that's the middle out thinking problem. People are thinking about these things from evolutionary biology or evolutionary psychology or neuroscience or whatever starting axioms they have, and then they're using that to make their personal private perspective argument, right? But the people who watch Piers Morgan are watching for a certain reason, and they're not logical. Now, when you embarrass somebody and prove basically that they're an idiot using logic, do you know what happens? That audience that's watching a logical debate, they don't care. It doesn't have any effect on them, right? And since most people aren't a billionth as logical as they claim, usually they miss the fact that the logical argument didn't go in their direction, and you also don't change their mind. And that's the real struggle, is that people don't understand what moves other people at all. And because they don't seem to have an understanding of that, there's not much there's not much that they can do to move an audience. And the real issue is when Piers goes and does this, all he's doing is flipping more people to the Fuentes cause. And he knows it happened, but he doesn't understand why. Like, he doesn't understand how badly he lost the argument. And now all the sub cult people, like Andrew Wilson's got a big crew. I love the Andrew Wilson crew, by the way. I'm on their Discord server. I pop in from time to time. The Andrew Wilson people, they all have their belief about how and why this argument was won by Fuentes, but the Warren Smith crew has a different justification for how and why the argument was won by Fuentes. right? And it's on and on and on. Every commentator, Carl Benjamin's got this big, long Baudrillard, ridiculous hyper reality argument about it. And I'm like, this doesn't even make it. Baudrillard doesn't even make any sense, guys. Like, I understand what he's saying, and I understand why he's saying it, but he's actually just reinvented nominalism. Only there's a slight twist. That's really all I talked to the AI. We agree. So,
Oh, great. Oh, great. We've got a Quaker and a bald guy agreeing with each other. I mean, I'm not a groiper, and I find the whole thing puzzling. So hitherto now, I've avoided giving any answers about it because I don't know what's going on.
yeah, I don't either. I just know you can't side with the person who's using inference and propositional tyranny to attack the honor of another person without evidence or in spite of evidence. Like, I can't support that. So Piers is completely off the list. And the more often they do this, the more they're going to flip people who won't even engage with the conversation. Like, I watched, I don't know, 20 minutes of the 2-hour original debate, and it just got to a point, and I'm like, I'm done. Piers hasn't made a single argument, presented a single piece of evidence, or even attempted to engage with any of the points that Fuentes either commonly talks about or brought up. He hasn't done any of that. He spent his whole time just attacking the guy indirectly, using inference and quotes from other people. And I'm like, this is a nightmare. This is the age of gnosis nightmare. You're preferring the words that his father said, and then using people are a product of their environment. Well, not all people. No, it's either all or nothing, kid. Right? And therefore you're racist, despite the fact that your best friend is black. And I'm like, that doesn't make any sense, Piers. It sounds like you're being evil. That's what it's like. Because why else would you attack somebody that way? Why can't you just deal? First of all, Fuentes has enough bad quotes that you could just use his words. You don't need to use his father's words. What are you, high? Why are you doing this? Something's going
And
on.
by the time you're Piers Morgan, you can have an intern do all this research for you.
He could have ripped off a video of Nick saying he's racist, because Nick says that fairly frequently. And he could have dealt with the issue. And instead he's saying, well, your father said this and you're a product of your environment, and therefore. And I'm like, dude, this is not going to work. Like, you look really bad. You look like the bad guy, not a bad guy. You look like the bad guy, because you're doing what certain people that you think Nick supports, whether he supports them or not is irrelevant, have done in the past. Actually. So maybe you're outing yourself as the evil you pretend to hate, Piers. But Piers doesn't know this. And I haven't heard anybody make that critique. Anybody. So I'm going to do it later this week, probably on a live stream. But yeah.
So we're taking seriously the idea that, if you don't have a religion, we could even do a little bit of substitution there. If you don't have an origin story, one will be provided for you without your knowledge and consent. And we could look at, origin stories could exist on multiple levels, right? So I could talk about how I come from my parents, and like their marriage and that sort of thing. I could talk about like some genealogy, family history stuff, how people ended up in the United States. I could talk about my origin as an American. I could talk about my origin as a child of an Air Force family. Talk about my origin in the mind of God, from all ages. There's different ways we can do this. And so I think part of what has to be going on in this whole story is that Fuentes is poking at some sort of an origin story about there. Maybe it's the so-called myth of World War II. I think that's probably what it is.
No, that's explicitly what it is. Yes. Yeah.
And then there's also the civil rights movement is like act 2 of the myth of World War II, where like we brought the fight home, and like took care of our own thing, and we did it non-violently, which is
Yep.
a great democracy way of doing things.
Non-violent war. Yeah.
Yeah. So the reason that, like, the thing is that when somebody starts poking at your origin story, it's hard to remain logical.
Yeah.
Right. So, like, if you came into a Catholic church and, God forbid, began to desecrate things, I would not have a logical response first.
That's
And you
right.
wouldn't do that, Mark. I've observed you inside Catholic churches. You're very well behaved. So thanks be to God for that.
Yes. Yes.
But like, the first thing I'm not going to do is like, your belief system and what you're doing right now aren't cohering right now. No, it'd be like, something with red in the face, probably shouting, and hopefully no more violence than God would want. So yeah, I mean, that's probably what we're dealing with here. Is Fuentes is going around poking at people's origin stories, and it just takes a lot of discipline to be able to engage in non-violent warfare, and a lot of people don't have that.
Well, if I can interject, I've got my take on it. The first thing about Nick and the Groyper, and it is probably the oldest, is it's a totally generational gap. Nick, as a white man, has been frowned upon, kicked around, not him, and he's a representative of 18 to 35-year-old. And the beauty about that, as I see it, that interview, and remember, Pearson has a whole team of advisors, fact checkers, not Nick Fuentes, and he trolled him so well, and the Overton window has shifted. For example, just the topics he brought up. He said, "You are a virgin, aren't you? Aren't you?" And then in the same sentence, he says, "I'm also a Catholic." That's Pearson. 3 mansions in London worth about £200 million. Second marriage, 3 kids all over the joint. And all the Groypers, 24 hours after the interview, found out his second wife making him a cuckold. It's all over the internet. And imagine what a person, what a character. And at the same time, you've got to remember, virginity is a virtue in a Catholic Church. So in one breath, he says he's frowning upon Nick also claiming to be a Catholic. And he says he's a lapsed Catholic. And ignoring that, it's a contradiction in terms, to say the least. But getting back to how I see it, once the white Western world, see, there are control words, taboo words. We all know what they are. And that has been broken. Talking about promiscuity of the 1960s, in other words, he says, if you're a virgin, you're a dunce. You're mad. There's something psychologically wrong with you. That's the ad hominem attack. And then he doxed his father, which is so below the belt. And there's 40 million views they were watching. It's disgusting from a professional journo like that.
Well, he's not, but he's clearly not a professional.
The second, it was supposed to be, BBC and CNN and all of those, for Fox News, whatever he was.
The BBC's completely disgraced now.
But
before
besides
Piers is like whipped cream on it.
Besides that, the importance, as I see from it, he says, "Are you a racist?" Of course, have I spoken too soon? So just neutralized him, because he had a whole set of questions, expecting him to say, no, that was a wrong clip. Please don't do that. He says,
right.
How about that? And this is so good. And he's proud. He says, "Yep, I'm a virgin." So he just simply checkmated him, literally every
Well,
proposition which he put forward to Nick. And
what it
bravo on Nick.
what it showed is that the I don't know if this is the right word for it, but the magic words don't have any power over him.
Well,
Not over him. No.
It's not even that.
I would go. That's the point you're missing. It's not a generational gap. It's no power over the people, white Europeans, Canadians, Americans, Australians, which have been frowned upon, trotted. You're the racist, you're the sexist, you're the misogynist, you're the fascist. You know the whole song, and it's been done for the last 30, 40 years.
But
by all the other races. I'm talking about America, anybody, and we've got there are certain forbidden words which the white person cannot use in their normal everyday discussion, as I understand. But anyway,
that's the result of the myth of World War II, and the subsequent, we'll say, victories like the civil rights movement in the United States. But the fundamental problem is, and this happens all the time, and this is the same problem with the Democrats attacking the Republicans in the United States. They say, they come up with a formula, right? So the Democrats did this. The Democrats said, Republicans are law-abiding citizens. Like, that's what they are. They all just like they hold up the law above all other things. So we'll get Donald Trump convicted for something, and then he'll be a convict. And none of these Republicans will now vote for him. Now that's just logic by 3-year-olds, especially since they have to believe that the conviction is real and important, and it's not about the law, because Republicans, even conservatives, aren't stupid enough to believe that we'll say all the laws of the United States are good, just, and perfect. So
that also have perfect implementation by fallen judges.
Exactly. And so the fact that you get convicted doesn't have the same hold that it would have over a leftist, because leftists are very, very, very legalistic and precise and to the letter. It's the other side that actually isn't. And this has been studied to death, actually. They're far more tolerant by any measure of tolerance they've been able to find. The Democrats don't like that because they're the intolerant ones, and they always have been, always. Right? Nobody mentions that, right? They're the party of slavery. Sorry, guys. Right? And Piers does a similar thing where he goes, I'll expose this guy according to these standards using a reputational model under his own rubric, and that will expose him as a hypocrite, and that will work. All leftists believe this strategy works, and nobody who isn't a leftist will acknowledge that strategy. They just don't. They're not perfectionists. So the fact that there's some exception to the rule is called Tuesday. It is not interesting, right? You have to make a compelling case, and the thing is, leftists in general can't do it. In fact, if you see somebody who can't make a compelling case, it's because they can't stand anywhere, right? Like Piers did. He's going back and forth on whether or not you're a product of your environment. Like, either make that point and stick by it, or don't make the point. But don't say, generally everybody. It's like, well, now we have to call out all the exceptions. What are you doing? You're undermining your own point. And they have to do that because they can't stand anywhere. When you can't stand anywhere, it's going to be very hard to make any sort of accusation stick against anyone from the perspective of somebody who isn't a crazy leftist or a moderate, because moderates have a slightly different problem, right? The leftists just don't believe in boundaries. If you ask them to draw one, they can't. Whereas the moderates believe that boundaries should exist, but they're kind of all over the place with where the boundaries are for each individual thing, we'll say, right? Whereas conservatives, they have boundaries for everything, and they're roughly the same for everyone. And where they disagree on boundaries, they defer quite often. Whereas moderates will not defer. Moderates are independent, and they'll hold up their whole system, their whole boundary, against all other boundaries. And that's really the difference between the three groups. And there are three groups. And every time people talk about two groups, it always fails, right? You get, oh, the woke leftists, and then it's the woke right. And it's by random coincidence, all the woke right people that are identified who aren't already classified as groypers or, quote, Christian nationalists, although I doubt that actually exists, happen to have been leftists last week. Could be a coincidence. I'm thinking it's not a coincidence, though. I'm thinking they're probably moderates now, whether they were leftists before or not.
I would just add one thing, which is, I think, the crux, as I see it, again. It is beyond that. And the question when he answers one of the questions, do you like, the Mustache Man and Stalin? He said, yes. So you like her, her H. I won't even mention his name. And he says, yeah. Was he cool? Of course he was. Look at the uniforms. Look at the marches. And just look how people loved him. So he didn't touch the taboo subject. The
right.
reason is,
That's
and
right.
then he goes, what about Stalin? We all know Stalin murdered anywhere between 60 and about 80 million people after coming into power in 24, 25 after Lenin, and then right up to 53 when he died. And nobody talked. Again, this is the left ideology. The point, what I think he's saying, I don't believe in democracy. When you, Mark, when you're talking about Republicans and democracy, it has robbed me of my life. And he's speaking for the 18 to 35-year-olds in the Western world, including Australia.
Yeah.
And he said, I've got nothing to lose.
Right.
The way, if I can use an analogy, you put a wild cat or a snake in a room and there's no windows or doors and you trying to catch it. And it runs around from corner to a corner of room. At the end, it's either going to go for your jugular or your eyes, depending on the animal. It's got no escape.
Right.
And this is a danger.
Yeah.
If I can make historical comparisons, Germany 1930s, run by the loony left and the circumcised ones in terms of pornography, and Berlin 1930s, yeah, God. And that's what they embraced the person. He says, I'll give you some semblance. I'll give you work. I'll give you order. That's what he came on. And the first two laws when he came in 1933, you know what the first two laws? He abolished usury and pornography. They were the first two laws passed by her,
But Jim,
nobody talks about that.
Yeah, you're highlighting the fundamental problem, right? The myth of World War II is sufficiently incorrect to be useless.
But it's weaponized. It's weaponized by the contemporary people.
I don't think.
Temporary people, of course it is. The establishment uses the establishment. Well, what about someone calling you a Nazi?
Jim,
or a fascist?
The establishment's a bunch of morons. That's the actual problem. These establishments, I've met them. They're actually low IQ morons.
Money talks, bullshit walks. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. If you got 10 billion, if you got 10 billion.
I have grown tired of the yelling. And since it's my live stream, I'm allowed to do this. Okay. So we are dealing with a conflict between two people who frankly should agree with each other more than they disagree. And the fact of the matter is that I suppose, we've got time to quibble about these points. But both of you yelling at once is only really going to irritate me. So maybe, actually, just for a minute or two, I'm going to talk to Ron here for a little bit, and I'll let you both back on when I feel like it. So how you doing, Ron?
Hi. All the Pentecostals in the congregation, please stretch your hand towards Father Eric. Lord Jesus, he done needs some help because they're crazy up in this house.
Yeah.
Good evening, sir.
Good evening. So you were actually listening. You didn't just hop on, huh?
Oh, I at first, and I have to ask I'll ask this because I might have misheard. Did that one fellow say the circumcised ones?
That's what he said. His words, not mine.
Yeah, okay. I was like, oh, dude. I'm like, it's been a crazy week, Father Eric. You know what I mean? Like, it's safer in the water in Australia than on the beaches. I'm just saying, being a somewhat Jewish kind of guy myself, I'm somewhat allergic to certain verbiage, such as circumcised ones.
Yeah. You've got to behave pretty badly to get kicked off here. So
I no.
and it's a little bit arbitrary. And if you don't like the arbitrariness of it, then go found your own YouTube channel. So,
well, can I tell you? I think I'm going to take a page from your book. Just the other night, after everything went down in Australia, I tried to have a conversation with people because I was bummed out, and it went sideways, just kind of like this. And I didn't push the button. And I regret that. And I think when dialogue is out the window, like, okay, fine. If you can't play nice in the sandbox, you're in the timeout room. I mean, I realized I had an Irish friend, Eileen McGowan, and she goes, good manners don't weigh anything to carry. So, all right. So with that out the way, you're the principal or the hallmark. So tell me something good about God. Give me something, anything on your radar or anything.
There's just some good things that are happening in my local community. Continuing, it's really funny, right? Like people will just bring me people that I need to talk to sometimes. And the good Lord will just give me a word. And that's enough to just kind of, I don't know. It's what it looks like to me is it turns things around. It makes things better. Just a good word to encourage them. And I just feel like, it's like St. Peter was ordered to put out into the deep and lower his nets for the catch. And sometimes the Lord just starts throwing fish into my boat. And
dude.
Yeah. And it's just like, man, I don't deserve any of this. All right. So that's the good word right there. The Lord, I don't even have to put the net down. I just have to show up and there's a fish. Make sure it doesn't jump out of the boat.
Yeah, that's that. I think what I've learned is I'll hit a dry spell. Like it'll just be, dude, I'll be throwing bricks. And then all of a sudden I'll do a throwaway jump shot prayer and then wham. I'm like, really? That?
It's just how God reminds us that we're not in charge.
I know. But it's funny? I think it cracks him up because he makes us almost to the point where all right, we ain't nothing. And then Satan's like, we ain't nothing. And then the little chubby kid swings the bat and cracks it out the park. And so every time he gets up to bat, everyone's nervous.
Yeah. That's the thing, right? God doesn't need our strength.
Yeah. Okay.
What would he need our strength for? He has all of the strength already.
Yeah.
He needs your cooperation. And that's the only thing we can deny him. Maybe our educated friend here can confirm that for us.
How's it going, folks?
We're talking about the absolute dependency of the human soul on grace for salvation.
Wonderful.
All right. So speaking of salvation, let's see if we can salvage the conversation tonight. You guys are back in. You haven't behaved badly enough for me to ban you forever. And if I ban Mark, then...
What did Mark do?
Well,
would
They
be
were just
awesome.
yelling at each other.
If
and
I, yeah, well, it's called a robust conversation.
How dare you
there's no
yell
insult.
at me?
And listen,
There's no
honestly,
insults. I hope I haven't insulted anyone. Did
no,
I
no, no.
say
There's no
something?
insult. There's no insult. There are different philosophies by which one can govern a ridiculous call-in show hosted for free on the internet, right? And
No, I do
um,
apologize. I do
yeah.
apologize.
and so like in real life, I would have
get where
just
you're
let
coming
you guys yell at each other because there's ways of handling these things in real life that
Absolutely right.
that work a lot better. And over the internet, it's like, all right, this is irritating to me. It's probably irritating to my audience. I'm just gonna sweep the board and we can restart over. Now, I still am trying to figure out what the Sam Hill is going on with Mr. Fuentes here. And,
So-
and I've gotten to a point where I figured out that he is poking at the origin story of a lot of the world that we live in. And the
Yes.
reason why, like if he had tried this stuff 30 years ago or 20 years ago, it wouldn't have worked because things were working well enough that people wouldn't want their origin stories poked. But there's now a significantly large group of people who are feeling disenfranchised, like the world they're living in isn't working for them, and that there needs to be a change. And he's the only one who's poking
Yeah.
at that. But like the thing that we've got to be careful with is that just because somebody's like poking at a problem doesn't mean that they've got the right solution ready to go there. And so,
Well, that's
I-
precisely the thing. I mean,
That's the
I
danger.
don't.
Yeah.
I mean, I find Fuentes absolutely deplorable, but I think part of the reason why so many people, I think my age, have flocked to Nick Fuentes is because they grew up in a generation where, the woke stuff was really taking off. And it got to a point where if you don't support X, Y, and Z that is absolutely considered trendy in the media, you're a racist and you're a bigot. And that was kind of what they were told. That was what our generation was told for like 10 years. And we were the ones that kind of had.
and if you don't have, sorry, like I'm adding on to your voice there, but if you don't have a home otherwise,
Yeah.
then how couldn't you be just utterly betrayed by that, right? So
Yeah.
like all of the woke stuff, all of the progressive ideologies around gender and race and poverty and all of that stuff was always like irritating to me, but it never like hit home because
Yeah.
I always thought of myself as a Catholic first, as a son of God
Right.
first, and so there was no like personal attack to it. It was just irritating things that other people were doing.
Yeah.
So if you don't have that sense of home,
Right.
it's a domicile, right? Oh boy, where have we
Domicile.
heard that word
I
before?
think it's also a generational thing too, because
No.
I think, and
No.
I think it goes to abortion as well. I mean, my generation, half of my generation was executed in abortions. That's something that I think a lot of people that were born in, at least in the 1960s, didn't have to deal with. Well, when my parents were born, that wasn't a problem they had to deal with. They didn't have to constantly grow up being told, believe this, or you're a racist. They didn't grow up having to have this trans, gay stuff being pushed on them. But my
Well,
generation,
I don't think that's true. Like when I talk to people of that generation, it definitely isn't true. It wasn't true Gen X either. It's just different things. But the fundamental problem is that one of the things that materialism does, right? And with materialism, we're just talking about we'll say the preference for material causes over, or material causes primary cause. One of the things it does is that it begs for a myth. And the greatest secular myth that we sort of settled on was the myth of World War II. And the problem is, I don't engage with Fuentes's stuff, but I don't think he's proposing any solutions. We're far away from that. Right?
Mhm.
What he's not even doing a problem formulation. So everyone's
yeah.
jumping to him solving a problem, and he isn't even at problem, much less proposed solution. And this is what I keep telling people on Twitter this. The guy is saying lots of very truthful things that aren't wrong, imprecise, or inaccurate. If you don't actually address those, you're making it worse immediately. The problem with, I'm glad Jim kind of pointed it out earlier, although he went off the rails after that. Like the problem with saying something completely stupid, like, oh, you like Hitler, right? And implying that's bad, is that Hitler was on the cover of freaking Time magazine. So this isn't a Nick Fuentes likes Hitler thing. Everybody liked Hitler. Everybody. And if
Except the
you want to
Catholics.
pretend like that was a problem or is a problem now, you have to come up with a justification for that. And there's no issue with that. But Nick isn't saying that he likes a particular part of Hitler or a particular, right? He's not saying any of that. But because materialism bore the myth of World War II, and materialism can't hold, right? It's betraying what you're describing, Eastern Thomist, is that one of the materialist sort of interactions is betraying everybody, right? It just betrayed everybody. And to be fair, narrative control betrayed everybody too, right? Because the internet, they'll blame the internet. It's not the internet. The internet came along and now we don't have narrative control anymore. That's Piers Morgan's problem, roughly speaking. That's just a symptom of a larger problem. Materialism betrays everybody. If you think your home is in material, maybe you're a science believer or something stupid like that, then the problem you're going to run into is that material will betray you, and you will have some kind of meltdown, right? That's what happens, because all domicide is spiritual. We worked this out 5 years ago. All domicide, as John Vervaeke describes it, is spiritual. And if you don't have a spiritual home, you're screwed. And you can go a long time before you notice in materialism. And because the materialism, because it happened a long time before the Great War, the second act of the Great War, because materialism constantly betrays you, and then it takes a long time for that myth of World War II to break down. That's why people didn't notice. But this is not a generational problem. If you think this is a generational problem, you've vastly misread what's going on. And it's Tucker and Gerald Cooper and guys like that who are pointing out the myth of World War II is false in an important way, right? And they're also being demonized, although I hate Gerald Cooper and I would definitely stake burning for him. He's got all kinds of problems. But you know what? Fuentes hasn't said anything as controversial and ridiculous that I know of to Cooper. Now, I don't listen to Fuentes. Cooper was sort of forced on me, right? So maybe Nick says all kinds of horrible things. I don't know. But Daryl Cooper is like, he's not dismantling that.
Yeah, he called Vice President Vance a fat race traitor. But I mean, I do think it is generational in the sense that I think the reason many young men are turning to Nick Fuentes specifically is because I think what happened with the woke stuff for about like 10 to 15 years, I think a lot of that stuff just created a different outlook that other generations just did not have to deal with. I mean, it was kind of like everything that was sort of building up from the great quote unquote Enlightenment. I think from like 2012 to 2020 just kind of went to a head. It was kind of like sort of slowly boiling up, like, oh, maybe religious pluralism's okay. Oh, maybe contraception's okay. Kind of throughout the centuries sort of building up. And then you get to trans, gay, BLM, all this different type of stuff. And it got to a point where just the massive craziness was pushed, but it wasn't just pushed by the fringes on the left. It was pushed by the media. It was pushed by all these different types of people. And I think it was kind of around, because I know Nick Fuentes was really starting to gain momentum in 2020 around COVID time. I think everything that happened during COVID, I think pushed a lot of people to the right. I think that was what really killed woke.
It,
And I
it
think
drove a
that's
lot of people crazy. I don't think it
it
pushed
did.
anyone to the right. I don't.
Oh well,
These aren't right wingers. Nick is not a right winger at all. Like, that's what cracks me up. He's not. He's at best a moderate. But look, the popularity of guys like Nick, and there are dozens of them actually, because he doesn't have that big a following. He's in a very large following. He might have one of the largest followings, but he doesn't have that large a following. The popularity of these people is based on one simple principle. If you tell people publicly about a truthful thing that matches their observation or their experience, they are going to be attracted to that. This is a natural process, and it is true. The fact that, we'll say, the entire UK government doesn't actually get outside and walk around their own dangerous cities and villages that they destroyed, rather by accident and unknowingly, because trust me, they're stupid, has to do with their perspective and their experience and their observation. When you're high up and you're looking down on a population and you observe bad acts, you can always say, well, propositionally, I know people are racist, and therefore this is probably a racist thing, right? And so those bad acts can be, reporting crimes only by certain races. That's probably what they were thinking, and maybe still think, because people are really stupid at the top. I'm sorry, I've met them. They really are dumb, right? That's probably what they think. They probably haven't come to the conclusion that there is a connection between bringing a bunch of immigrants into your country and them performing horrific acts against your culture and society and peoples. They cannot make that connection mentally because they're stupid, and the evidence isn't evident to them because they don't ride the subways. They don't walk around the city at night. They don't go to the store.
Bring him in? Why bring him in?
Yeah, well, certainly they are out of touch, but I think
Mark, why bring him in?
Why what? Why bring it?
Well, in Europe, Australia, America, Canada. Why bring him in? Yeah.
Well, there's lots of, we'll say,
stupid.
proximal reasons.
Your proposition, they're stupid. Fair enough. I agree.
They are stupid, and they're buying into a global ideal, and that global ideal, to Father Eric's original point, is a religion. It is an equality-based religion. And you got to understand too, these smart people, because they did this experiment in Boston, right? At the turn of the century, right? The late 1800s, early 1900s. They seriously believe, actually believe, that if you put bad people in a nice area, that will make them good people. I've seen the documents where they write about this justification for destroying places like Jamaica Plain. So you walk in Jamaica Plain around Boston. First of all, the areas around Boston that are, we'll say, the worst neighborhoods are the physically nicest parts of the city, with a couple of exceptions. And you look into the history and you find out, no, they did that on purpose. So Jamaica Plain's full of gorgeous old mansions, at least as gorgeous as they get in the United States, which I will grant you is not as gorgeous as one would like, we'll say, right? So yes, I understand Europe's got us on that. That's fair enough. But for the area, pretty nice area, right? And then it's all poor people. And they're living in, usually in parts of those buildings, or some of them have been torn down, right? So some interim neighborhoods with apartment buildings. So they did that on purpose because they have a religion, right? In Boston's case, it's Yankeedom. It's roughly the outgrowth of Puritanism, which of course splintered a billion
Just
times.
look up the lyrics to Stars and Stripes Forever, because there's actually lyrics to it. And it'll tell you everything you need to know about the Yankee religion. It's it's the purest, most distilled form. There's an excellent barbershop arrangement of it. I listen to it every 4th of July, but I only listen to it every 4th of July. So
yeah, it's an equality doctrine-based religion. That's what it is, because religion is inevitable, which is the theme of this whole thing. And so what you're seeing is a war of religions. And that war of religions is roughly going on because of the myth of World War II, is becoming exposed by all the people who are betrayed by materialism. Because part of materialism is if you go to college and make a lot of money, or sorry, if you go to college, you can get a job making a lot of money and live on your own in a house here.
No.
In a house
I'm waiting
by
to talk.
yourself, happily. And when you can't, what do you think is going to happen? They're going to question the myth.
You still haven't answered my question.
Well, basically, they think that you're a product of your environment, and therefore, if we put you in a nice environment, and so there's this universalizing imperialist sense that
Right.
we have this obligation towards everybody, everywhere, which is a really frightening thing for people in the government to say, that we have an obligation towards everybody, everywhere.
What
because
about
governments,
China
Yeah.
and North and Russia? Why not
What
them?
about China and Russia?
Hmm.
They aren't doing that. They have
Why?
religions.
Yeah.
Following your logic, I'm just following what you just said. No,
Yeah,
no.
yeah, they have religions. They're not making that mistake. They're doing other things.
Who are
for
they?
Sure.
They're elite you're talking about. So Bezos and Zuckerberg, they've got religion of Boston, whatever.
No, Bezos.
football.
No, Bezos and Zuckerberg have it totally different. They're not. No one's an atheist, right? If you say you're an atheist, you're
Yeah,
just
but
lying to yourself.
when you say the elite, who are you talking about?
Which country?
Group of-
Every
Yeah, I
every
mean,
country
US
has
survey.
different
US
elites.
survey. No, US survey. Why? In Europe, applicable to European Union. Also, it's not in Australia too.
Yeah, the European governments are all
why?
infested with an equality
So it's the
doctrine-based
government.
religion.
So you think that the government, the people, the politicians, the senators, are decision making. They're not influenced by. They're not. They're not representative of the country, of the people.
No,
the
they're not,
populace.
and they're not supposed to be either. Which is like it's a weird argument.
Hmm.
They're actually not supposed to do that,
So-
particularly in Europe. Like
Exactly,
Europe was
and-
never
and-
set up that way.
And that is
ever.
the danger. That is the danger of Fuentes, or like him, or left or right or indifferent. He's waking up the young generation. That's my point. You have got nothing to lose. This so-called democracy is a fib. That's why he goes with it. He
He's
goes,
not-
you've got
he's not-
nothing
he's
to
not
lose.
with-
Your words, just let me finish. Your words got no meaning to me. They've lost value. They've lost the power. Your weaponized words, the buzzwords, no longer is applicable. And that, my take on, or my thing is, that's what happened. If you look back in history, is incredible. And I always love quotes. And one of my favorite quote is this, which I think is, we talked about a bit of World War II and history. History is a set of lies agreed upon by Napoleon Bonaparte. And we got a set of lies, which Nick Fuentes, if not him, if he's not around, there will be another dozen of them. From left, far left or far right.
That's
That is
because
the
he's
danger.
telling the truth, and the
Eh,
truth
well,
isn't
according
coming
to him,
from the world.
But would you agree that he's very radical? I would say yes.
I don't know that he's radical, Jim. I haven't engaged with.
I would say
anything
he
he's
is.
said.
Well, he's saying to our
however-
standards, he says he loves Hitler, he loves Stalin, he's a racist, sexist.
Everybody
these
loved
things-
Hitler and Stalin back then.
No,
This is
no, I'm,
No,
not
not
about,
right.
I'm talking about now,
Right.
contemporary world.
Yeah, given
Yeah.
everything
Right.
we know
The
about
reason why you
Holocaust.
think the words don't work is because it has nothing to do with the
According to
words
him,
and the
not me.
magic.
Not me.
It's a
That's what he's
different-
saying.
It's a different worldview, right? In
Mm,
other words,
mm.
if somebody redefines racism and defines it correctly, right, as I have a preference for my own race, which is
Mm.
this is not a psychological reality. I had this conversation 2 days ago on my Discord server. This is not a
Right.
psychological reality. It's a biological fact. It's not humans. This works for all animals and insects and plants, actually. So to say that you prefer your own race is just stating a biological reality that exists
I would
throughout
agree.
the animal kingdom. This is, but when you frame it that way, this word racism no longer has that quote magical effect.
It's weaponized.
That's because it's a change in perspective. It's a
Mm.
change in frame. because meaning happens from content, and I have a video of this on my channel, and context. You change the context, the word's meaning changes entirely. The so-called postmodern philosophers understood this well. That's how they manipulated a bunch of people, right? That's what they used. So you can make the argument, I'm going to call it, sorry, Jim, no offense, the low grade, low IQ argument that the magic doesn't work anymore. But if you don't understand the function, and your point is valid, if you get rid of Fuentes, someone else is coming, because the truths that he's speaking that are still completely and entirely accurate and precise are not going away.
Well,
and if you don't argue them,
I think,
you're gonna
Mark,
have a problem.
this might be a useful time for you to point out those things that you think Fuentes is correct on, just so that we all understand what it is that we're looking at here.
I haven't heard a single statement that he has made ever that has been technically incorrect. He has talked about how opportunities have, and Jim's already talked about this, have opportunities for white males have been taken away on no good basis, right?
Sure.
That definitely
Absolutely.
happened. He's talked about how people have been demonized for not doing things like using pronouns and stuff, which is just completely ridiculous, right? He's talked about it. This is all the same things, by the way, that Jordan Peterson talks about and more, right?
And so that's the stuff that you've seen that you are like, yeah, I can see why this guy has a following.
Let me give you a quick heuristic, Father, for everybody. This is a trick I use. I don't like calling it a trick, but people seem to think it's magical somehow. Okay.
Mhm.
When my enemy, when someone's enemy comes out with some like evidence or proof that someone's bad, okay,
Mhm.
and their evidence is something like, well, your father said something that I interpret to be racist, and therefore you are, and because you're the product of your environment,
You assume that they don't have anything better to attack.
I assume that they don't have any evidence. And so
Yeah.
far, everybody I've heard talking about Nick Fuentes has brought exactly zero impressive evidence that this guy is bad or wrong or has ever said any. He's got hundreds of hours of video, guys. If he said something bad, please just show it to me. They can't seem to do that. This gets suspicious after a while. It gets really suspicious.
But you would still hold up the possibility that in those hundreds of hours of videos, you'd probably find something you disagree with, because you can't talk out here without finding something that we disagree about. So
right, this is right. That would then become the most banal and uninteresting and unimpressive piece of evidence in the history of mankind.
yeah.
So it's still not going to work, guys. You're going to have to bring something really convincing to the table, and you haven't done anything but attack the guy personally so far. So I don't know whose side you think I have to be on, but I have to support Nick Fuentes because you've left me with no option otherwise.
Well, it does seem to me, I just want to say this real quick. It does seem to me like he's not just saying, well, Hitler or the Austrian painter guy was really, really loved back in his day, as if to look back at a historical analysis. It does seem, especially looking at his interview with Piers Morgan and other interviews like he does, he legitimately admires the German painter guy, which is different, I would say, from saying, oh, well, everybody loved the German painter or the Austrian painter guy in his day.
Yeah, again, these aren't interesting points when you have a bad myth that's being broken apart. And you're saying true things about people's opportunity and what's been going on. And it's not generational, because I know a lot of people that are in my generation and are in the generation before me who are also noticing the same things, right? They're noticing the same patterns and they're responding to the same patterns. And the fact that the world broke open and half the population roughly went nuts after the fake news virus scam should be no surprise to anyone. And if it's a surprise to those people, I suggest you don't listen to their political or social commentary, because they're a little dumb. Like, this is really easy to understand why this happened and why all of a sudden, we'll say the old way we used to understand narrative got broken apart and destroyed. Well, of course it did. It wasn't consistent, and materialism betrayed everybody, right? Whether you're a scientist or even a believer of one or more of these so-called Christianity things. I mean, the Catholics suffered greatly during this period, and they still haven't worked it out for themselves what happened.
Yeah. So my analysis of Nick Fuentes is basically, I think the reason that some people turn to, I'm not going to say everything Nick Fuentes says is wrong, but to the extent that he has said things in praise of like Hitler or Stalin or other some nonsense, I think the reason people turn to it is it's like Karl Jaspers when he was analyzing the rise of Nazi Germany. He pointed out how modern technology has severed communities, which led to the rise of Nazis because people don't have a home. And when people don't have a home they can turn to, then people are more likely to be picked up by extremists because when you have nothing to live for, you're going to find something to live for because that is what keeps humans sane.
Right.
Yeah, I'm interested about. So I've seen a few clips of our friend Tricky Nicky here, and he seems like a charming and pretty funny fellow, and
High charisma.
yeah, high charisma, and you know he. This is there's a fellow who occasionally has good observations on the Bridges of Meaning Discord server. Mr. Jean talked about him being like a Rush Limbaugh for the 21st century, and Rush Limbaugh. You know, you just go ahead and cue the pretenders up here. He wasn't like a serious heavyweight thinker. You know,
Right.
you don't talk to him about the same terms that you talk about Leo Strauss. I don't care if you think Leo Strauss was like correct at all, Mark, but he was
Yeah.
like a heavyweight thinker who wrote
Right.
big, thick books, you know,
Right.
and
right.
and like read all of the books and stuff.
That's perspective again. Yeah.
Yeah, and so so I'm linking this to, you know, kind of our present moment. We've got this lightweight jester figure. I mean, it's hard to tell if he's got any convictions at all, really, right? Because like
Yep.
we can't actually see, you know, where he's putting his money,
No
where he's
fruit.
putting, yeah. So he could literally just be doing the algorithm game. When I talk like this, the algorithm feeds it. Like
Yep.
like he could be just entirely a slave to the internet attention machine. Um, and then something else you noted, Mark, that he's not offering any solutions. Reminder that we have solutions available here. Go to confession, go to mass, pray the rosary, don't skip leg day. That is my proposed solution. So far, it's working decently for me. And maybe you could get similar results. I don't know.
Well, it does. If you probably are not. I mean, I've doing a bit of research on authoritarian personalities and so forth. Just my hobby. But Nick, everybody's now talking about Nick. I beg to differ once again, Father. He does mention I am a Catholic. And didn't say a pious Catholic, didn't say Novus Ordo or old traditionalist. He says, I am a Catholic, and that is my salvation. And he came with the word Jesus or is king or whatever, which was used in in America prior to the Second World War by various people. And he got in trouble in that. So he does, in a sense, give a hope. He's not a nihilist, I don't think he is. I could be wrong, of course. But he does say, this is what I am, and I respect that. Not everyone is a Catholic, and especially in America, most of them are atheist or non-Catholic out of 350 million. So to say and to categorize him, I know you're probably not very familiar with him, to say he can be swayed. Now, the other point about his life, which nobody seems to mention, is he's the first person who had been doxxed. He's been literally attacked with his life recently. He couldn't fly internally in America. All of his bank accounts were closed. He couldn't go on YouTube. All of his bank accounts. So
Bank
there's
accounts
something.
is that's a line right there. That
All of his bank accounts were closed. Not only that, he couldn't fly anywhere. The
Right.
other thing, YouTube, all of those,
Mhm.
public media and or whatever you call it, banned him. Again,
Right.
he's whether he's saying the truth or his version of the truth, that's irrelevant. But I do have a person high regards with a man with balls. I have to use that blunt word. I think it's appropriate. It's not offensive. I think in Spanish it's called cajones. All right. I think he does have that. With respect, that's my personal view of him. But he's a danger, I think, of people like him because he has woken the new generation, 18 to 35-year-olds, and he's telling them, I think, the truth. You got no hope of marriage, having a family, having a house in the suburbs. You're a loser, even if you have a full-time job, maybe even a couple of jobs.
Mm. Yeah,
Universities,
I'm not going to
universities
be.
attend that.
I'm not going to
Universities
be
says,
happy with the guy whose message is hopeless.
well, he says, well, if it is the truth. All right, let's take a 25-year-old American or Australian with an arts degree. Let him save for a house. You want to buy in Sydney? Sydney's second most expensive in the world after Hong Kong.
Mhm.
Average house
Yeah,
is about
yeah.
$3 million bloody dollars. American, not Australian.
Yeah, yeah.
Come
yeah.
on, that's a
I-
reality.
I'm not going to sit here and say that things are great right now.
It's awful.
I had a rant a few weeks ago about the site's prosperity index, which I thought would be a better thing to pay attention to than the stock market, because the stock market only benefits those who already own assets. Right. So it's like it's a fake measure of the economy. Like we got to measure grocery prices, housing prices, and healthcare prices.
Anyway.
So I'm not going to sit here and say that like everything's actually great here, but it is like, and here I am spending over an hour talking about a guy whose material I don't engage with at all, because I just don't, and I'm not that terribly interested in doing so. But if you're right about like there being a real hopelessness about his message, then I can't see anything good coming out of it. Because like I'm not going to sit here and say that, if you just go to mass, go to confession, pray the rosary, and do heavy squats, that you're going to be able to afford a house in Australia. But
Right.
something good will come from that, and I'm quite convinced of that, and I'm certain you wouldn't disagree about that, Jim. So that's what I think we're really contending with is in this period of time we have. There's a lot of it's like a fissure is opened up out of hell, and the smoke of Satan's coming and at least for a time, blocking out the stars so that we can't see. Maybe there's a flood of lying liars whose sting is like scorpions, and they sting the inhabitants of the earth who wish for death.
I
The
like that. You
inhabitants,
should write that down.
the inhabitants of the earth, of course, can't see the stars anymore, and they're wishing for death. But for those who have hope planted in their hearts, the torment is not so great. So
Yeah.
Right, but it's not. See, that is the problem, right? So again, if you correctly intuit that getting rid of Nick Fuentes or silencing him again, because to Jim's point, he's been silenced, it is just going to cause somebody else to bring the same message. That is correct.
Well,
because
right.
he's saying truthful things that are real, and the reason why it sounds hopeless is because if you're not offering a solution to these truthful things that seem bad, then you're going to run into a problem. And that is the problem of hopelessness. But then you're going to run into a battle because, for example, you can tell people, oh, you know what, there's no good jobs available and therefore you won't be able to afford a house, right? And then somebody like me is going to come along and say, that's a lie. That's actually just wrong. Lots of people are doing that all the time. You can't do it the way you want, right? Because materialism has lied to you about how valuable your college degree is, right? And then they go, oh no, that's not true. And I'll be like, yeah, I was homeless and then I bought a house. So like it can be done. This isn't that hard. Actually, yes, you have to live with roommates for a few years, and you're not going to be eating at any restaurants, that's for sure. But it can be done. It can be done nowadays. I've
And
seen people do
a
it.
certain amount of it is like, oh, you want to live in San Francisco? You want to live in London? You
Right.
want to live in Sydney?
Right. That's the lie of materialism, that you can have these things if you just follow this process, because we're stuck in the process. But
Mm.
having a Nick Fuentes there and not dealing with the things he's pointing to that are correct will lead to hopelessness, because if nobody addresses these issues, because they are real issues that are observable and that have impact on people's physical experience in the world, then you're going to increase the problem in all cases. The minute you start talking about this stuff and you don't address the things that he's bringing up that are actually experiences and observations that he has of a significant part of the world that other people have also had experience or observations of, then all you're doing is creating a war that we don't need to have. We could just address those issues. So if you stop, say, I don't know, paying for immigrants to use up all the housing in the city, because that's why there's a quote housing shortage. There's no housing shortage in the US. Dumbest thing I ever heard, right? But if you force people into cities and cause housing shortages in very small markets, you can come to South Carolina. There's plenty of houses here, and they're cheap. Then you're going to those resources are going to exacerbating one of the problems that Nick has pointed to, no doubt, right? Or you could use that money to fix the problem and that's not a one-for-one trade, right? Because you could also not spend that money, right? So there's three conditions. It would make it very positive, right? So we could fix this pretty much actually tomorrow, but those people have a different view. But again, even within the people, will say, of the same generation or similar generations or same financial condition, you can't say, oh, you can't afford a house, right? Because I went through this during fake news virus scam. People were saying you can't afford a house. And I said, there's a house for $65,000. Might not be quite move-in ready, but someone was living there before. $65,000 on 3 acres. Right next to me. Anybody could have afforded $65,000 to be on 3 acres, and you're right outside the capital city of the state. Right outside. Right. And there's actual jobs here and stuff. Right. It's not that hard. And no one bit. And so that house is probably worth a lot more now, because in the intervening, 4.5 years or whatever, since it was sold, it's become worth more. But these things were always lies, and there are always ways around them. And Nick's not offering even those solutions, like, oh, you should all get together and live in a big apartment somewhere. That's what I did when I made minimum wage in the United States. And I still saved up enough money to buy a house. So don't tell me when minimum wage is bad. It just means you can't live the way you want to live. And you can't, eat out at yummy steak restaurants when you want to, which was the bane of my existence for sure, because I love steak. I didn't have steak for years because I just couldn't afford a steak. Not a good one anyway. Right? I mean, but that making that sacrifice for 4 or 5 years, and then you can afford a house. And I'm sure that's still true. I've seen people do it. It's not that big a deal. Yeah, you might have a 2-hour commute to and from work. Yeah, I did that too. Crimea River. Right? But that's not to say that Nick doesn't have a point,
Mhm.
right? But somebody's got to offer, a problem formulation that is solvable, right? Offering random problems formulations like many people do talk about, Nick, is not going to work, right? And then offering the solution to that problem formulation and then actually implementing any of that still has to happen, right? And so we're very far away from addressing this because nobody wants to address it. They want to say, this guy said something bad about a guy who a lot of people admired back in the day too. And now he's the bad guy. And that's not going to work because what he's saying is still actually true. And the truth really does matter a lot, like a lot. And you can't just brush it away because you're too stupid to address the truth. Or more importantly, your unconscious or subconscious knows full well that you're the bad guy. Piers Morgan is the bad guy. He's not the only bad guy. That's the bigger problem. But he is definitely the villain. There's no question about it. And not just on this issue. I've seen him before. He's the bad guy. He doesn't know he's the bad guy. I get that. But he's still actually the bad guy.
Can I? So I do have to go. Absolutely agree what you just said, Mark. But again, in terms of history, every society, every country, I suppose, has to have his boogeyman. The person you say, we are the goodies, he's the baddie. Just as an example, Pat Buchanan going against neocons is neutralized. You have your David Duke. He nearly became governor of Louisiana. Now, they bring him on now and then to ridicule him. And, and CNN the last time it was about 3 or 4 years. And this is the pattern of politics. We are politicking, the art of the possible. But what's so surprising about Nick, it's totally different. 2025, 21st century, and the control of media, radio and television no longer plays the thing. It's social media, so various platforms. And since his Candace Owens and Carlson interview and being suppressed for about 10 years or 10 years, he was at Boston University. He left. He's really well read. He says it, and I believe him. He's an orator. And he's only 26 or 27, which is amazing for a young man to be in that position. The question will remain: will the system create another boogeyman out of him, which it desperately needs, or will he survive the 21st century by the use of multiple forms of media or avenues? And that's the question.
Or we could just opt out and do things in real life.
Right.
Yeah. Well, real life. Well, that's what he's saying. There's no such thing as a real life for the young men. Why young men? There's no future. That's what he's saying.
No future is not real life. No future is potential, right? But they have a real life, and that's the message they need to be given: is what they can do with their lives to have more than they have today, or as I like to say on my channel, be better, right? Because they're not being told how to be better, other than go to mass, go to confession, pray the rosary, and don't skip leg day, which is why messages like that are really important, because Nick is not going to be able to give you that message, probably ever. And the people like Carl Benjamin, and I really like Carl, but also right, who read Baudrillard and don't realize he's just reformulating nominalism slightly differently and talking at that level, they're not giving Nick and his audience some way out of the predicament that they're in, which is they need guidance. And Nick's message is these things are a problem and we need guidance. Whether he says it that clearly or not is actually not relevant. That is clearly the message. And no one in authority is giving them a problem formulation they can buy into and a solution they can implement that solves the problem formulation as given. A lot of people are giving problem formulations with no solution, and a lot of people are giving problem formulations and giving them a solution that obviously does not address the problem they've outlined. That's happening all over the internet, and that's the problem of the splintering. We're not going to get everything back in order, we'll say, at the top level underneath one umbrella until we reinstantiate Christendom. But for that, the Catholic Church has a long way to go.
Done it before. We could do it again.
Yes, but we're not even at the point of having that discussion of, no, guys, you need to reverse course immediately and start instantiating top-down control again.
Yeah, that's not how it worked the first time, so that won't be how it works the second time. What shall we say about Hitler? I think we're going to say one thing about Hitler. I'll take the law and order, but hold the genocide, please.
Exactly. Exactly.
I'd say he's evil.
That's the genocide part. Yes.
That's this is the problem Nick's complaining about and pointing out, is that the myth of World War II is wrong, right? And the fact that we'll say one bad thing happened, which by the way, I went over this on my channel once too, on the Myth of World War II live stream, right? It seems to only be him, and he ain't the only one that did the bad thing that everybody points to. So, got to address that at some point. People have to address that. You can't sit there and say Hitler's bad because he committed genocide and then ignore all the subsequent genocides. That's not going to work. Right. And that's where we get the nonsense with Palestine, which is just a mess. Like, that's a whole mess. I can't
I would
support
agree with
side A
that,
and I
but
can't
I
support
think
side B. Great.
Just on the other side, have you do you know the author David Irving?
No.
Well, just write that down. That's the flip side of World War II, unorthodox. But he's a genuine Oxford historian, still living in London. David Irving, all about Churchill. Do that and read that history if you want to have the other side. As a lawyer, there's always two stories to every. There's heads and tails like a coin. So Easton Thomas and Kay, please look at it, and I think it's a good read.
Well, I think he said that he liked Hitler because he thought the uniforms and the TikTok edits.
It was trolling people. If you don't, you got to look.
Yeah.
That the funny thing about that, Pierce did not realize, and his team did not realize he was trolling him. It's the best 2-hour troll I've ever seen.
Which is why I said, I'll take the Law and Order, hold the genocide, please.
Hold the genocide, please. Right. And I think Denise is right. Like, yeah, it was really an occult group LARPing politics. And there's a reason why that happened. And the reason why it happened is because it was a, quote, religion of the day situation. And the thing is, we're still in that. That's why when I do this, I'm probably going to do it as a live stream later this week on Navigating Patterns. Like, I'm going to point out, we're probably going to, maybe I'll use 3, but I'm probably only going to use 2 takes on Fuentes and Morgan's, interview. And then I'm going to show you a much better and easier and quicker way to think about this that actually makes far more sense, because Baudrillard does not explain the difference between Piers and Nick. It just doesn't. Like, I know that Carl Benjamin, like, you can fit anything in Baudrillard's formula. It's kind of stupid. It's just nominalism. Nominalism came way before Baudrillard, so who cares, right? But the fact that you can do that and get away with that and still have followers means that's a cult. Like, Carl's got his cult. Maybe he gets more or less people in his cult because he gave them a good explanation, right? And then you've got other people commenting on this. Andrew Wilson, he's got his cult, right? And so they all have slightly different explanations for what's going on, but they don't have a way to unite people outside of agreeing in the moment to their formulations. And that is the problem, that when the myth of World War II broke down, because that already happened to us, by the way, guys, no one understood. Oh, now we don't have a unifying myth, right? A lot of people are calling it a narrative. I don't particularly like that word because it's all over the place. I have a better definition on my channel, of course, so you can see that, right? We don't have anything binding. And so that larger
Yes, we do. Yes, we do. We got Father Eric Seats, and that is a top man. We got something there. Sorry to interject. Exactly.
We're going to put that out in front.
There we go.
Yes,
Perfect.
yes.
All right.
Sorry, go ahead, Mark.
But yeah, when we don't have that binding narrative capability or that binding myth, then what you have is a bigger problem. And no one's talking about that problem except maybe me and like 3 other people anywhere, right? That's the bigger issue, because you and that's not to say you still don't have to solve the true things that Nick's pointing to, because you definitely have to do that. The good news is that you could actually do that tomorrow, right? But we have to be willing to have the conversation. And the globalists, wherever they are, and Piers is definitely one of them, don't have that on their radar under the correct category of issue that needs to be addressed, because they're too busy instantiating the equality doctrine based religion, whichever one it is, because there seems to be more than one, although these things are hard to classify, right? And so we're nowhere near addressing these issues. Nowhere near. We're arguing about who won the debate and why. Look, who cares who won the debate and why? Let's figure out what's going on. And it's not Baudrillard. It's not hyper reality versus reality, as Carl Benjamin claimed. I thought that was the weirdest claim I've ever heard. I'm like, what do you mean hyper reality versus reality? Who's doing the judging here, right? It's very middle out thinking. I know what the truth is. I'm going to call that reality, right? And you're not even using the right words. And when Nick points to something like, look at how ordered and sharp dressed and law abiding these people are from the visuals, right?
And then go to Walmart.
Right. But look at how they are. I long for that. Yeah. So did the Weimar Republic. Why do you think they used democracy to vote the guy in twice? Once into office and once chancellor for life. Oh, democracy leads to Hitler. Yeah. No one talks about that. This is another problem with the myth of World War II. Nobody wants to admit democracy got us there. Nobody wants to. Nobody will touch that with a 10-foot pole because they're all cowards or morons or completely ignorant. I don't know which of the three, and I'm a pragmatist, so I don't really care which of the three it is. It's got to be one of the three, though.
It reminds me of a book that was written in the 19th century called "Liberalism is a Sin," and I believe that Pius IX very much enjoyed that book and gave a hearty approbation to the author. Yeah, our republic is not made for anything but a moral and religious people.
Right.
Perhaps that could tell us something. Go to mass, go to confession, pray the rosary, don't skip leg day.
Father, if I may, because it seems like we've kind of exhausted this Fuentes conversation, may I bring up one of the things that my friends were bringing up? So you know how I was bringing up unless you want to keep going on with the Nick Fuentes conversation.
I'm a little curious about your goofy friends. I think you talked
Okay.
about them a few weeks ago. And,
Yeah. So they were
and
saying, I told them this thing about reincarnation that I brought up Hebrews, I believe 9:7 or 9, is it 9:7?
Mhm.
And they said that the reason reincarnation is compatible with that verse is because that verse says you live once and then you're judged, right? But then they said, well, that what that means is that when your soul is dead, in some metaphysical sense, you're done. But since you can die physically, but your soul is still has the potential to reincarnate because you're not really dead. It's just your physical body is dead.
Well, I'm sorry to say this, but on the basis of what you've reported, I can firmly say that your friends are deeply misinformed about the way that Catholic theology works and their interpretation of especially that part of the letter to the Hebrews is not in conformity with what is, as far as I can tell, a universally held opinion of people who are authorities. So that you're going to get like ecumenical councils, you're going to get the statements of popes, you're going to get the statements of the church fathers. You're going to have the entire pastoral practice of the church and how we like care for the dead and the dying in contradiction with that. So they're pretty incorrect, and you can feel free to ignore them at least on this point. And it may, give you pause if you ever hear anything that doesn't quite sound right, to come ask Father Seitz about it, because I believe and I really care about these things. So
Yeah, fair enough, but they're not
to
Catholic.
Oh, they're not Catholic. Okay, well,
Yeah. Well, why listen to them at all? This is the problem. This is my fundamental complaint, right? The only way you get a
Sorry.
bunch of people complaining about Nick Fuentes for completely different reasons, and all of them missing the important thing, all of them, is precisely through this own idea that they understand enough about the world and enough about the situation they're viewing, and that they're smart enough to work it out for themselves. The problem is they're not. It's that simple. Like, you're not that smart. You don't see what's going on behind the scenes. You're not understanding, like, I'm not saying no one, because it's not no one. How many people understand that when Nick Fuentes holds up, an old picture of the Nazis, what he's doing is showing you symbolically what he longs for, which is the order, right? And the strict adherence to a standard that he admires, that has been lost to him and, in fact, stolen from him rather clearly. Like, everybody agrees with that part, but they don't see that's why he's using the picture, because that's the exemplification of the ideal instantiated in materialism that he longs for. And that is not at all wrong, by the way. Again, all of Weimar Germany also longed for that. And then they got put him on Time magazine multiple times for doing that. And you have to remember too, which nobody talks about, that entire project of his rise to power was funded by the Europeans and the Americans. Funded by, because they wanted democracy there. They wanted equality to work. They're on the same project. The globalists have not switched projects. It's the same project.
This maybe is not quite as sharp and orderly as a Nuremberg rally, but I think it has everything that the human heart should long for. The cross out in front, the priests leading the way, and a large portion of the faithful all gathered around the monstrance in the middle, our Lord sacramentally present in the Eucharist. So if anybody could possibly benefit from this, I am on team law and order. I am an aspiring canonist. I am zealous for the law, both the divine law of God and canon law, insofar as it serves that. And I invite you to come and see what it's a part of. Hopefully, there's a church nearby you where things are being done properly, where we've got mass, confession, the rosary, and striving after useful things. And so that is, I think, where we're going to end tonight's stream. It is, in fact, dark outside, perhaps a whole 8 minutes early, but there is a possibility for law and order, and we need to look to God to find that. And with that, I will say good night and God bless you all.
Good night.
Good night, Father. Good night.